Hi, Founder fans. Jason here. Today's founder is Francis Nash, the person who Nashville, Tennessee is named after. Now, Francis Nash was not born to wealth. He and his brother Abner had worked their way up in society, studying hard, becoming lawyers, investing in various businesses, and Francis ends up living in Hillsborough, North Carolina. And before we get to the American Revolution, we need to talk about the Regulator movement, aka the War of Regulation, aka the Regulators' insurrection. It goes by a lot of names. What we need to remember is regulators. In the late 1760s and into 1771, the regulators were a majority of the people living in western North Carolina, parts of which are now modern Tennessee, that were not happy with several things. First of all, the coastal elites living on the North Carolina seafront or ocean front, that's where most of the money was, that's where most of the power was. They were also very unhappy with what they saw as local corrupt officials, judges, lawyers, and sheriffs who were raising taxes and collecting taxes on people who could not afford it because there was a recent drought that ruined the growing season. Therefore, most of the people who were farmers there couldn't grow food to eat, let alone food to sell and products to sell on the market. At this point, you have some merchants coming in from the coast selling products that these farmers now need and rely on at a bit of a higher cost. You can see how this might make some people a little bit upset. They also don't see Governor Tryon, who came in and took over, or Tryon came over and took over as governor of North Carolina, royal governor of North Carolina, didn't do anything to help. And the people are upset. And there were some battles that broke out. The most notable one is the Battle of the Almanac, but relevant today is when they took Hillsborough, North Carolina, where Francis Nash was living. At this point, Nash had already been accused of embezzlement, but the charges had been dropped. Because, as the farmers saw it, and kind of rightfully saw it, the judges, sheriffs, and lawyers kind of had a little circle going where they took care of each other and were accumulating all the power in the area for themselves through various means, notably taxes and, well, some embezzlement. This didn't make people happy. So when the regulators came through Nashville, Hillsborough, Francis Nash runs away, as you might imagine. He goes back. The regulators after this end up being suppressed pretty harshly through the Battle of the Almanac, which Nash goes back and joins the governor in suppressing these people. And even though the vast majority of people living on the frontier, like 95% of the people living there, supported the regulators, not only could a lot of people not vote, but anyone associated with the regulators their vote was suppressed for several years and things of that nature. Unfortunately for them. Now, this is kind of a prelude to the revolution, which begins just 4 years later. However, as for Nash, because the people who were angry at him could not vote since they had joined the regulators, it is pretty easy for him to win election to the assembly. And he goes to the colonial assembly, and he's there when things get a little heated, and the next governor, Governor Martin, prevents the assembly from meeting. They meet in the provincial assembly, elect members to the First Continental Congress, and this is essentially the shadow government that helped start the American Revolution in North Carolina. Now, Nash, despite having been one of the elites who just suppressed the farmers, is now supporting a rebellion of his own. And many of those farmers end up fighting underneath him when he goes and joins the Continental Army. He joins as he ends up becoming a brigadier general in the Continental Army, and for a time has all of the North Carolina men fighting in the Continental Army under his command. Nash spends some time winning some battles in the South before he moves up to join the Philadelphia campaign in an attempt to keep the British from invading Philadelphia. This fails miserably, but in the famous Battle of Germantown, Francis Nash is leading a brigade in the fight when a cannonball comes through, strikes him and his horse, killing the animal and throwing him on the ground. The ball had gone through one of his thighs, and although he survives for a few more days, Francis Nash then dies pretty quickly. Many people might consider him a martyr to the cause, although, as I said, many people in his area, North Carolina, probably would not have considered him a martyr to the cause. They still didn't really care for him very much. even though they were fighting underneath him. That being said, he does get Nashville, Tennessee named after him, which at the time was basically just an outpost, but later would become a city that has professional sports teams, and therefore he has more of a legacy than most American founders have, even though very few of us know who he is or his story or any of the controversy behind his story. Again, he had suppressed the very people he would later lead during the American Revolution. Just 3 years later, Germantown is in 1777, so 6 years after the Battle of Almanac, he is dead in Germantown. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a favor and hit like. And if you're new here, subscribe. I put out videos about the American Revolution all week long. I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.